Hey guys, Moldran here. Today I want to talk about legendary farming. You know, like those farming competitions on live streams get more and more popular, but it could also be, for example, if you want to compete with friends and like show off some good legendary numbers per hour, or if you simply want to improve your own number of legendaries that you find. Now this would be very beneficial because, for example, if let's say the patch or with the itemization or the expansion comes, if you know how to like farm legendaries really fast, for example, if you join the 10 plus legendaries per hour club, you're gonna have a massive advantage over other players who farm like 1, 2 or 3 legendaries per hour only, and you're gonna be one of the first to like find the new super items. You're gonna be one of the first who can either sell them for a lot of money or keep them and have the best gear. Now all those tips are based on the Whirlwind Rend Barb, which should be common knowledge already by now. If you don't know what it is, you can check one of my previous videos. But most of the tips, except probably one, should all work also for other classes. So now let's start with tip number 1, the zone which you're farming at. Now for legendary farming, killing leads with most classes and builds is usually not the way to do it. So I identified 5 zones in like a video I did a few days ago, or a few weeks by now, where you can farm massive amounts of legendaries per hour. Like those zones all have high amount of mobs, good drop rates, for example Eastern Channel, Western Channel, Weeping Hollow and so on. But some zones are still better than others, and one of them is Fields of Misery. But one thing I want to point out is, it doesn't just matter like which zone you farm, it also matters how you farm a zone. For example, until recently, I was just going to the Fields of Misery, farming it like completely one run, kill some mobs, and then I left the game, did the same again and over again. And then my viewers were actually, or some people were actually telling me, hey Moldran, why don't you try the Decaying Crypt? That's a dungeon that sometimes spawns in Fields of Misery and is supposed to be really good. And I was like, okay, let's try that. I just wanted to confirm that it doesn't work. But then actually, like every time I went there, I actually got at least one legendary, and I was like, wow, this dungeon is actually really good. And after some further testing, I found out this dungeon is actually the best place in the game to farm legendaries. If you like time spent for average legendary drop rate, this is the best. So like I really like improved my own run by every time I do Act 1 or Fields of Misery, I always look for the cave, and if it's there, I'm gonna go in. And if not, just gonna start a new game and hope that it's there, because it's really amazing. Like it's just one floor. The first floor should always be the one that you clear, and there's so many zombies and mobs that spawn. And yeah, and as you probably have seen by now already, it's also important to like wait a few seconds in those big rooms for like the mothers to spawn. There's also zombies, because they have a very high drop chance, but they just take a few seconds to spawn. So you need to be patient here to really optimize like running through the dungeon. Okay, so now after talking about the zones, the different zones, the next step you have to do is to optimize your route. That's number 2, and this depends on the zone that you're running in. For example, the East and Western Channel are mostly randomized, so there isn't really much you can do there to improve. But for example, the Fields of Misery, they always have, as you can see here, the same structure, the same layout. Of course, dungeons and events are different places sometimes, so but you usually get the idea, and there are certain ways how you can run this zone. Now important is the spawn locations for Decaying Crypt. There are 2 spots that you always have to check. This is this one here, and this is this one here. Now in the beginning, I personally, what I did, I just thought Fields of Misery was a good zone, and I was just like doing anything. For example, I was just completely randomly running the zone. Of course this wasn't really effective and stuff, and other people like continuously improved the way how to farm there. For example, Jesus in the beginning, like he was the first one to like optimize the route, and he was basically going to the next zone, getting the checkpoint here, and then he would basically always run the map in the same area, and he would always like here run automatically or past the spawn locations of the Decaying Crypt. So this was a pretty efficient run, but it got improved further. Now first improvement was made by German Diablo player Baudusau. He was like testing, and he thought that there would be so-called hotspots in Fields of Misery, like spots where more mobs spawn than in other places. For example, I think around here and here and here and here, he discovered those hotspots, and he also like optimizes run, so he would always like farm those things, of course, like the zones where he thought most mobs would farm or spawn, and of course also like check and get into the crypts if they are available. But then, like another player, I'm the Real, who currently holds the world record for most mobs killed per hour in Fields of Misery, which is like 11.6k, pretty crazy. Tested this, and he found out, if you can see here, actually let me compare this with the thingy here. Just gonna remove like my paintings. Drawing skills suck. Oh, seems like I can't. There we go. Good. And here you can see that this is the map layout. You can see the same map layout, that those gray areas are the zones, and the other things are like where white items dropped. So he was basically tracking on the entire zone. If he farms it, where do items drop? Like, are there certain places that have a higher drop chance than others? And he found out there are no hotspots in Fields of Misery. That pretty much like mobs can spawn frequently and in big packs everywhere. And if we, for example, take a look at with yellow items and legendaries, you can also see like they can drop everywhere. So now the best way to farm the map is probably to just like spawn from the waypoints, which means you can spawn at any waypoint. Like if you enter a new game, you start at any of those waypoints, and then like always try to go close to the locations where the crypts are, and try to kill as many mobs as you can outside. And if there's a crypt, of course, go in. And that's how you can optimize your route. And for example, when I did that, I went from like 6.5k kills per hour in the beginning, now to like 8.5k kills frequently, which is definitely improvement. And it also like shows in the legendaries per hour, because I'm getting a lot more now than previously. So that was tip number 2. Let's move on to number 3. Now, this is the Barbarian specific tip. It's about a skill that's the main damage for this build. It's the skill and rune Rend. Now, with Rend, there are 3 big options that you have, and they all like affect your farming efficiency and speed. Now, the first rune that's very popular and good is Ravage. Ravage, for example, is great in places like the Eastern and Western Channel, where you have like those masses of skeletons that have low HP and die usually after 1 Rend. But they are like big groups, so you benefit a lot from Ravage. But then, on the other hand, you have fields like the fields, or zones like the Fields of Misery, where the monsters have substantially higher HP. Especially like those Moon Clan warriors, the goats, they have very high HP, and they wouldn't die with 1 Rend if you use Ravage. So you have to use other runes to improve your Rend damage. One of those options that I currently run with is Lacerate, which brings the damage from 700% to 903%, and that's definitely an better, especially if you're going to be able to like one-shot them with 1 Rend and a few sprint tornado ticks. You save a lot of time, because you don't have to wait 5 seconds and then Rend another time. But also viable is Bloodpath. Now, my tests, I haven't tested this enough yet, but Bloodpath seems to be pretty similar to Lacerate. It decreases, or just like Lacerate, the range is not as big as with Ravage, but increases the damage. And it works like this, so if enemies die, basically all enemies around them begin to bleed for additional damage. So if you are good, or if you have good gear and you're able to group the mobs really well, then with Bloodbath you can probably reach even more damage than Lacerate. I haven't tested it yet, and the best thing you can do is just test it yourself. Like do 1 run with Ravage, or not 1 run, but let's say 1 hour with Ravage, 1 hour with Lacerate, 1 hour with Bloodbath, and track down the kills per hour that you get with each rune. And maybe you find one favorite rune where you get more kills than with the others. Okay, so tip 4 is gonna be about the gear. Now about the gear, it's important to like reach attack speed breakpoints. For example, it only matters if you have Rough Berserker. So for example, there's a 1.43 attack speed breakpoint, which I currently don't have. But there's also like a 1.66, I think that's one of the next ones. And if you pop Rough Berserk, your attack speed increases by 25%. And as you can see here, I'm gonna get it to pop. My real attack speed with Rough Berserker, which it usually is all around, is 1.67. So I hit just about this breakpoint, and I'm going to be able to maintain Rough Berserk without any problems during the entire run. It's also important to point out that the crit chance is important to get like 85% as I have, then a lot of crit damage, and for this build, like those are the important stats. Again, strength, crit chance, crit damage, and weapon damage, which you can also boost with rings, for example, that have plus damage. And if you optimize your gear, if you optimize your DPS, you're gonna kill faster, you're gonna kill mobs with less whirlwind ticks or less rends, and you're gonna be able to farm, again, more Legendaries power. And the fifth tip and last tip is just cooperate with other players, work together with others, share knowledge, share tips, and so on. For example, you could find some farming partners, or just like do some competitions with friends, see who finds more. Because if you do everything by yourself, just like I tried to do in the past, it's much less effective than, for example, if you build your network with other players, or if you like post in forums, talk to other players, and like exchange tips and strategies. Another good tip I can give you is just watch streams or YouTube videos from players of your class and see how they are doing, what are they doing different, especially if they are really successful. For example, if they are farming a lot of Legendaries power, you can learn a lot and use that strategy to improve your own farming style. And as I said, if the expansion comes out or the new itemization system, you're gonna have that head start with being able to farm more Legendaries than others, and you can use that head start to make a lot of money on the auction house or get the best gear for maybe some future endgame content. So yeah, that was my video, 5 tips about Diablo 3. Thanks for watching, I'll be back.